In September 2019, my husband and I bought our first house, and we only put 5% down, which meant that we had to pay PMI or private mortgage insurance. But in the last about year and a half of owning our home, our house value has gone up about $100,000, and we've recently been able to drop PMI. So today I'm breaking it all down to share of whether or not I think PMI was worth it. Hey guys, I'm Marissa and welcome back to my channel. Here on my channel we talk about life and money and how you can enjoy life while still accomplishing financial goals through the use of a budget. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, then scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss when I post a new video. Also, a little disclaimer to this, I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I am just sharing our experience, and this is just for entertainment purposes. Like I said, my husband Jacob and I bought our house in September of 2019. We now live here in Portland, Oregon in our same home, and we have a 13-month-old son named Peter. We bought this house, we closed on it as soon as I actually found out I was pregnant, and we were so excited to buy this home for our future family. Before we bought our house, Jacob and I were very serious and intentional about working on our financial goals. For years earlier, we actually worked on paying off over $87,000 of student loan debt. We then saved for an emergency fund, and we ended up upgrading our cars a little bit. And then we even worked on saving for a down payment on a house. Now, the traditional amount to save for a down payment on a house is 20%, but that can be a lot. The house that we ended up buying was $428,000, and 20% on that is over $85,000, and that's even before closing costs and additional extras that you have when you buy a new house. And because that 20% down was such a large amount, we didn't know how long it would take us to eventually even be able to buy a home. So we decided to look at potentially using PMI to be able to get into a house sooner. So what we ended up going with when buying our home was a traditional conventional mortgage. We had a fixed rate loan, and we decided to put down 5%, which was the minimum needed for this conventional loan type that we went with. And because we decided to only put 5% down, that ended up only being about $21,000 as a down payment rather than $85,000, which felt a lot more doable, and we were able to save that amount much quicker. But because we only put 5% down, that also meant that we had to pay for PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. PMI can definitely feel like you are just throwing your money away because it doesn't end up going toward anything beneficial to you. It actually is there to protect the lender and not you if you stop making mortgage payments on your loan. But for many loans, if you end up putting less than 20% down, you do have to pay this PMI fee along with your mortgage payment every month. So for us, our PMI ended up costing us $94.87 each month, and this was just an additional part of our mortgage payment. So our mortgage payment in total included our principal, interest, PMI, taxes, and insurance, and the PMI portion was $94.87, which honestly wasn't that high. When we were going into the home buying process, I figured that it would cost substantially more than this, but I was surprised when I talked to our lender of figuring out what this amount would be. But while $94.87 isn't that much, it would be really nice to just not pay it, because again, it wasn't going towards anything, and it just kind of felt like we were wasting our money with paying PMI. But we recently were able to get out of this. And this is the one thing that I will say you definitely need to chat with your lender about and make sure you have a full understanding about PMI before you even sign your mortgage documents, because this was definitely a mistake that we made. When we bought our house, I remembered even asking our mortgage lender about the PMI and how we'd be able to get out of it and everything. And I thought that I could just get out of it at any time. And I even asked specific questions and didn't get a clear sort of response. And so I just figured that I could get out of PMI at any time. So about a year and a half into owning our home, we've seen some pretty great market appreciation happening in the last year because of the pandemic and other factors associated with that. And I've been tracking our house value through Zillow. We also made an extra $5,000 in principal payments to our mortgage principal. But the biggest factor in being able to watch our equity go up was definitely due to the market appreciation that we saw. So I had been tracking this, and I figured that we were right around that 20% mark of equity, which is what I thought we needed to be able to drop PMI on our loan. So I reached out to my mortgage lender about this when we were about 20% there, and I mentioned that I wanted to see about getting this removed. So he had actually sent me to someone else with the bank to talk to about getting this done, and The second person who I talked to at the bank actually told me that I had to have my loan for 2 years before being able to drop PMI, which was very unfortunate because even though I asked very pointed questions about this, I never got an actual response, and I just figured that we were good to go. And I was just really frustrated that that wasn't clearly communicated to me. Although I definitely take responsibility in that because I literally signed all the papers when you go to closing, which is, a stack this big, but I'm sure somewhere in that it talked about that. But therefore, with our loan type and everything, there was a 2-year requirement of paying PMI before you could drop it. But their stipulation was it could be sooner if you had made improvements to your home that added additional value within that time. So we actually were just finishing our backyard project. We put in like new turf and new plants and bark dust and like all of the things to make the backyard look good, because before when we moved in, it was like a mud pit. So we did actually make that addition to our home, and that actually counted for them as something that added value to the home. So once that had been a qualifying event for the possibility to remove PMI, my bank then called out for a broker's price opinion, which is different than an appraisal. It actually ended up being significantly cheaper. It was $150 for us to do this broker's price opinion. A real estate agent came out to our house. She was here for a whole 3 minutes, came through, took pictures of our house, and then she was gone. And 2 weeks later, she came back and said how much she thought our house was worth. And based on the value that she had set for our house, minus the balance that we had on our mortgage, we ended up having over 20% equity, as I had thought. And we therefore were able to drop PMI. So actually getting the broker's price opinion ended up being a simple process. Although I will say that the beginning part of trying to make sure that we were eligible to even drop PMI ended up being a headache, and I thought that we almost weren't going to be able to do it because we hadn't met that 2-year threshold yet on the PMI. But thankfully, again, we had made those improvements. And again, as a huge disclaimer, this was for us, specifically for our loan type and with our bank. This is going to be different for everyone, so definitely reach out to your lender and make sure you have all the information that you need. I would even say to get things in writing so that you have a plan moving forward and have the same expectations as your lender for when you could possibly drop PMI. So I feel like that was a long story, but it was quite a process to be able to drop PMI, but I'm so grateful that we were able to do so. So over the 20 months that we were paying our monthly PMI, we ended up paying a grand total of $1,897.40. And that money obviously didn't go to anything, so it kind of just felt like a waste of money. But overall, I feel like it was not that much compared to what it could have been if we had to have PMI for a few more years. So let's talk about whether or not I think PMI was worth it for us in our specific circumstance, because again, everyone's circumstance is going to be different. I will say that it definitely was worth it for us in particular. But a lot of the factors and reasons of why it ended up being worth it are things that I never would have guessed would happen and things that I couldn't have prepared for. Because the biggest factor is that we saw insane market appreciation on our home because of the time that we bought. We bought in September of 2019, and as we know, 2020 and into 2021, market appreciation has been insane, and our house has gone up over $100,000 in value in the last year. When we bought our house, we went from having $21,000 in equity, which was just like the 5% that we put down, to now having over $140,000 in equity in our home based off of that market appreciation that we've seen, as well as just making our monthly payment and an additional $5,000 that we've paid towards principal in the last year and a half. So looking back to before we bought our house, like if we decided that we wanted to put 20% down, that probably would have taken us another year or two. And at that point, now there's no way that we could find a home of what we paid for it then. And I know that a lot of people right now who are looking to buy a house for the first time are really struggling with this because every month the housing market is going up and you can't save fast enough to be able to have that much as a down payment for the house that keeps going up in value. So I think that it worked out for us because of the timing of when we bought our house. And these circumstances are not normal. I'm not going to expect that my house is going to go up $100,000 in value every year for the rest of the time of us owning this house. But therefore, by paying an extra almost $1,900 in the last 20 months with PMI, we've been able to have our house for the last year and a half and have that appreciate over $100,000. So I would say that yes, that was definitely worth it for us. But again, going into it, when we bought our house, there's no way I could have seen this coming and had no clue that it would have been the benefit to this extent. So this is going to be different for everyone, I think, on whether or not paying that extra PMI would be worth it, because it's also going to depend on market circumstances, which no one has a crystal ball. I for sure don't. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Just sharing our history and past with using PMI for our first home. And going forward for our next home, we definitely want to put 20% down on that. So we will take the equity that we have and roll that into a future home, and hopefully we can avoid PMI from here on out. But if you are looking to use PMI on your home purchase, please, please, please talk to your lender and have a full understanding of what it would look like to be able to get out of PMI, if that is your goal, to be able to ditch it someday. Have a full understanding of the process that you may need to go through to be able to get rid of it, and also do the math to figure out how much you could be spending overall on PMI. Maybe do a best case scenario, a worst case scenario, a middle ground scenario, and see how much you could be paying over that amount of time towards PMI. So let me know in the comments below if you have PMI on your home, or you did at some point. Do you think that it was worth it to pay for PMI? And also, if you've been able to get out of PMI, was it also a headache, or was it easy for you? Let me know in the comments below, and also don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.
Already packing, come with me. I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know.